Greetings, YouTube. I was recently looking at a game called Ruins and Wastelands, which is essentially a Pathfinder port of the 1992 edition of Gamma World. And they did a pretty good job. It's not perfect. It has some weak spots. I think that they've done some great things with like psionic powers, but it also makes the psionic powers really powerful in the in the Gamma World style setting. They made the plants very samey, rather samey, which made kind of disappointing in my book because in the book, the original book, the 1992 edition, which the game has now inspired me to reread again, um, they had more differentiation between the different types of plants. And they completely ignored the possibility of playing non-humanoid animals, just playing animals, which I think was a major miss because they are just such a cool option to be able to play a fully sapient creature. And because it's Pathfinder based and you have the Noble Wild product out there, so much of your work is already done for you. You wouldn't have to do much at all. But that's neither here nor there. But I want to talk about today, though, are the post-apocalyptic demographics, specifically unmutated humans, often referred to as true humans or sometimes pure strain humans, people that were genetically engineered prior to the cataclysm to have stable genetics, and those stable genetics meant that they are more resistant to radiation, they are a little tougher as far as, having more con boost and being more resistant to diseases and such, and they simply don't have mutations for the most part. And in the setting that they give, because they actually give a specific location in Ruins and Wastelands, they use the UK, the British Isles, which is interesting because I had not really considered. I always think of America when it comes to those kind of things, but has one advantage. It's one nice little cohesive zone, as opposed to the sprawling, vistas of America, which you literally can just walk in any direction you want to. You have more limitations about you're keeping your player characters more restrained in that on those islands, which I think is kind of a nice idea. But the numbers of pure strain humans in the communities that they're describing, and they do some nice, there's a nice selection of different cities and kingdoms and things, and they give a solid background of like, here's the kingdom, this is the capital, this is the percentage of what different species in the overall kingdom, as well as this particular stronghold. You get the point. There's a really high percentage of pure strain humans, really high. In some cases, as it's 70 plus, and I find that baffling. I have never imagined for a heartbeat in any campaign I've ever run, or I've just done a thought experiment of, or I've played in, never has the unmutated humans been the default species. It has always been the altered humans, the new humans, and the new animals, the mutant animals, be they bipedal or quadrupeds. They look like normal animals, even if they may have they have mutations, they have a fully functional mind and perchance an ability to communicate, or they have weird mutations that, like anybody else, can have weird mutations in these kind of wild and wacky settings, like Gamma World can have. Now I can kind of see it in Darwin's world, because in Darwin's world it's very grim. It is our world essentially, and many of the mutations are not good. They are not the Marvel X-Men mutations like Gamma World has. In fact, you even have to spend a feat to be fertile. The default is that most everyone's sterile. And of course that means that eventually the species is going to die out, unless of course you do draconian methods to make sure you get all the fertile people together and breed them like crazy, which is a dystopian nightmare in and of itself. But I just never in my head for a second thought of the unmutated humans as the default population in a majority. They are always they're the absolute corner cases in any game I've ever run or I've ever even thought of. The majority of people are mutant humans or mutant animals of one type or another, or plants. But the plants, and again, they're not common, are about as common as the unmutated humans. And the Knights of Genetic Purity, which is what they're called in Game World, I forget what they call them in Ruins and Wastelands, um, they are a desperate attempt to try to hold on to their people, to try to pull people together under a banner of a fascist authoritarian banner of trying to preserve the species that is unmutated humans. Of course, in every game I've ever run, or even a thought experiment I've run, there are actually ghost mutants amongst their numbers. And when ghost mutants is essentially a mutant that has no outward signs they are a mutant. They're the classic Marvel X-Men type mutants. You know, like Jean Grey, you can't tell. Wolverine, you can't tell. You know, you look at most of the Marvel X-Men type mutants, and they don't look mutants. Some of them do, but most of them do not. And some of their abilities are very passive. For example, if Wolverine didn't have the claws, there'd be no way to really tell that he is not a normal person. Other than the fact that when you start to talk to him and you realize that, he's 200 years old and has the senses of an animal. But say you've just got massive amounts of disease resistance, or you have, skeletal enhancement, and you have kinetic absorption or something, all very passive things, like regeneration, things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as mutations. The person is just going to be viewed as very tough, and maybe even be considered some kind of uber man that they will then be put forth by the Knights of Genetic Purity as some paragon that we should also aspire to, all the while they are in fact a mutant. So for me, they're the corner cases. The number of pure strain humans in the universe is very small. And even some of the ones that are living amongst them are mutants and may very well not know it. Or they discover they're mutants and they very much want to get out from under. Or they're a type of mutant that they can then use their abilities to maybe control the Knights of Genetic Purity for their own good or own evil ends. They're mind controllers, that kind of thing. Is it Killraven from Jessica Jones? Yeah, his kind of powers. That would be a devastating ability because he looked perfectly normal. It's just that he can make people do what they want, and if you play that correctly, because he was very overt about it, but if you play it well, he just would come off as very charismatic. Because if he was careful and he didn't order people to do things that no person would do under any sane circumstances, and you just told them to do things that benefited you but didn't make them look like they were sticking out like a sore thumb, you could keep that game going for a very long time until you were in a very strong position of power. And by the time you got to where you wanted to, it wouldn't matter anymore if anybody knew. So those kind of mutations could still function within the Knights of Genetic Purity, and some of the leadership may not know, some may know and not care, some may be trying to take advantage of those people. You get the point. It's all politics. It's all power, brokering, that kind of thing. But I've never imagined that the pure strain humans were the biggest bulk of the population. So I'm asking folks that are seeing this, how often do you have pure strain humans in a post-apocalyptic setting that is kind of like the wild and wacky Gamma World, Thunder the Barbarian, that kind of thing, where they are the norm, and the mutant humans and the mutant animals, whether they be bipedal or not, are the outliers. So they're the minorities, and the humans are not. Because I'm definitely not looking to play your classic high fantasy game. I mean, I realize that Gamma World is science fantasy. The game is overt about that. The opening chapter directly addresses it. But I'm not looking to do the whole human-centric high fantasy setting. I cannot tell you how tired I am of human-centric, high fantasy settings. It just bores the tears out of me. And whenever I did a Gamma World style game, if not directly Gamma World, then it was not going to be something I did. I want the wild and the wacky. I want the mutant humans and the mutant animals and the mutant plants and, the mutant slime molds and what have you. I want those to be the people and the genetically pure humans to be the shrinking minority that is probably very likely going to go extinct in the near future because there just aren't enough of them left to keep that line going. And it isn't even necessarily an evil act on someone's part. There just aren't many left. And since they're scattered all over the place, finding each other so that they can have offspring is getting increasingly difficult. Except for the, fascist authoritarian Knights of Genetic Purity who are going out of their way to hunt them down and pull them together. And then you've got the whole, Immortan Joe thing going on from Fury Road, which was twisted and warped in so many levels. So let's talk about the post-apocalyptic demographics of your games, either as a GM or as a player, or even a thought experiment. If you were running the idea through your skull, whether it's for a tabletop role-playing game, or for fan fiction, or for actually more, traditional literature, what have the demographics that you have always defaulted to, and you always kind of figured they were just what everybody else did too?